UFC 319 is over, and we have a new middleweight champion, Khamzat Chimaev. But his win has actually divided the MMA community into two halves. One half is of the opinion that he hugged his way to the belt. The other half are of the opinion that no, he didn't. He insulated risk for 25 minutes while maximizing scoring certainty. He didn't just hug, he harvested. He didn't hide, he herded. Which brings us to today's topic of discussion, that is boring dominance the most dangerous weapon in MMA right now? Well, look, I get it. People wanted car crashes, reversals, a momentum storm, some round stealing bombs. Instead, they got a cold, mechanical, methodical, and frankly indifferent to your appetite for chaos. And that disconnect, the disconnect between what wins belts and what wins the room, that's the story of UFC 319's main event. Chimaev didn't just beat Du Plessis, he edited the options. How? He went into the UFC's equivalent of Microsoft Excel, froze the first two cells, position and pace, and filtered out everything Dricus does best. You can boo that, you can meme that, but if you care about how fights are actually won, especially in 2025, maybe you need to study it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: dominance doesn't owe you fireworks, dominance owes you inevitability. And that's what this was: inevitable. Often from the first contact of each round. Now, Chimaev hit a takedown in seconds, 7 to 8 seconds, right? And then just never let the fight exist where Du Plessis breeds best. We are talking 12 of 17 takedowns landed, 21 plus minutes of control time, and a clean sweep on the cards, 50-44 across the board. Those are not just stats, that's a thesis on risk control and the oxygen economy of championship fighting. Now, if you only judge fights by how your pulse changes, you probably hated it. And you were not alone. The United Center booed stretches of the main event. Fighters like Costa and Diaz fired off the predictable boring takes. Social feeds tilted into wrestling hugging jokes. But I want to push past that surface noise and show you what those boos actually prove, and why this win, style and all, is going to shape tactical behavior in this division for the next 18 months. See, because the thing everyone is missing, the fresh angle nobody's really voiced, is this: the most volatile striker in the division just got forced to fight a fixed income bout. Du Plessis, who normally imposes entropy, randomness, volume, scramble, chaos, was made to live inside a narrow, predictable band of exchanges. And when you compress a chaos fighter into a neated dataset, you don't just beat them, you borrow their future rounds and spend them early. So let's break this into three layers. The first, how the control worked at a micro level. The second, how the control repriced Du Plessis' offense. And the third, how the boos are actually evidence of a deeper competitive shift. Then I'll map forward what this means for rematches, contenders, and the middleweight meta. First point, the micromechanics of making a fight smaller. Chimaev did not need a lot of tricks. He needed a handful of very repeatable solves. Watch the entries, level change on the first beat, hand fighting just enough to keep DDP's posts busy, and a clear preference for finishing along the fence where frames die. That's not crowd pleaser stuff, but it's elite economy. When you can get to preferred finishing surface, fence or mat, in under 10 seconds and from across the logo, you are dictating the axis of the fight. From there, what impressed me most wasn't just the takedown count, it was the pace of decision making on the mat. The folk style adjacent chain, Wrist rides, cross faces, leg hooks is designed to keep your hips heavy and your opponent's choices expensive. He didn't chase frantic ground and pound, he chased position insurance. Rides that survive explosions, ties that survive the crowd's whistle. That's why you see big control time accumulation. You don't spend to make a crowd pop, you spend to make judges nod, and the judges nodded 3 times, 50-44. Notice the round opening pattern? Fast takedown, settle, wedge the far hip, threaten the crucifix in spurts. That crucifix tease isn't for highlight reels, it's a compliance test. If DDP overcommits to freeing the arm, you slide to mount or half guard with a deeper ride. If he undercommits, you score and burn clock. This is how a fighter converts explosion opponents into timekeepers. Each second on bottom is a quiet theft from Dricus's late round volume plan. And Dricus did try the right things. He threatened a guillotine early, he built some late stands. He even found pockets in round 5 to throw, but to have impact from the top or the pocket, you need breath, and the oxygen tax had already been assessed. People call this boring. I call this asphyxiation by design. The second point, pricing Du Plessis' offense out of the market. Now, Du Plessis' brand before this fight, 6+ strikes landed per minute, unorthodox combinations, awkward angle shifts, and a willingness to eat a shot to create a brawl, depends on one thing above all else: possession of space. If he can force messy minutes, his opponents make bad trades, but Chimaev locked the order book. There was never a fair price for Messi because the fight kept being repriced to flat. Hips pinned, head posted, wrists stapled. Here's where it gets interesting. Analytically, Dricus's best path wasn't knockout or burst. It was incremental taxation. Body shots, low kick tolls, clinch wrists, scrambles that force reshots. Anything that makes a grappler pay interest. We saw flashes. We saw scramble energy in mid-fight and more life late. But the control was just too early, too often, and too centered. When you're taken down in the first exchange and kept there, your later investments never get compounding interest, and the score totals reflect that reality. Clean 10-8s awarded by live scorers, broad media cards in the blowout range, and the official 50-44 across all 3 judges. If you're Du Plessis' team, you go home with a very specific homework sheet. First, re-entry disruption. Jab feints that draw level changes on your timing, not his. High knee threats, not to land clean but to force wider shots that bounce off the hips. Inside hand pummeling to break the first grip before the fence becomes a second defender. Second, mat math. If you can't win the first scramble, win the second. We saw him accept the mat in spots that must be replaced with immediate hip scoots to a post, not a half beat later. Third, body work early. The only lawful way to move a contrast cardio fight is to lower the other guy's ceiling. Dricus's best weapon here wasn't headhunting. It was thudding the body when they did get space, even in the clinch. But let's give credit fairly. You can draw every perfect line on the whiteboard and still may not matter. Chimaev's entry was so quick and clean that many defensive sequences never even started. He removed steps from Dricus's decision tree. Now, the third point, what those boos actually prove. People see that a referendum on grappling. I see it as a proof that MMA has outgrown the thrill-only model, but our audience hasn't fully caught up. In 2010, a control-heavy win often masked insecurity, hold to hide. In 2025, control is more often a proof of concept, hold to build. This is an important distinction. The crowd at UFC 319 booed a wrestle-heavy fight as it moved into championship rounds. Fighters piled on with "no one wants to watch this" quotes. Media coverage noted the division in real time. But here's the twist. The boos are also an admission that the losing fighter was never given a chance to be who he is. For a chaos athlete like Du Plessis, denial of self is denial of spectacle. That is not boring, that is elite negation. If you label that boring, you're actually praising it accidentally. You're admitting that one guy just took the batteries out of the other guy's toy. Simple. There's also a cultural shift underway, the title fight incentive. Champions are not paid to entertain first. They are paid to remain champions. The win bonus, the PPV points, the legacy compounding. None of that cares if a fan in row 300 wanted elbows. And the UFC itself didn't exactly penalize the outcome. If anything, the organization praised and rewarded the result, even as they acknowledged the split crowd reaction. The gap between cage truth and crowd taste, it's not going anywhere. So what's the unique perspective here? It's that Chimaev didn't just win rounds, he won time. He converted Du Plessis' defining metric, high pace, high chaos, into a non-renewable resource and then spent it slowly. Most analysts will talk about takedowns and control time. I'm here saying the real weapon was temporal compression. When a striker's offense requires sequences, setups, reads, rhythm, you destroy it by refusing to give them contiguous seconds. Fight IQ at the championship level is as much about when exchanges happen as how. That's why boring can be the perfect insult and the perfect compliment. Boring means nothing happened that you expected to happen, and in a title fight, if your opponent never gets to run his script, you wrote a better script. So was it boring? Well, here's the real question. Should fighters care if it's called boring? Controversy is traffic. Traffic is leverage. If the next contender headlines with Chimaev and the promo is, can he keep it standing? That's intrigue. If your path to victory is reliably repeatable against elite opposition, you don't abandon it. You variate it. Add new threats off the base. Build a little more visible violence into the ride. Elbow flurries from half guard, step over mounts that produce near finishes, and the narrative flips from boring to suffocatingly violent without sacrificing the win condition. For Du Plessis, the answer is not learn how to wrestle for a year. The answer is micro timing. Retool the first 5 seconds of each round and each reset. The best anti-grappling in the world starts upstream. Deny the entry, not the takedown. That means stance discipline in the first exchange, predictive framing on known shots, and punishment on line changes, front knee threats and short uppercuts as deterrents, not necessarily finish shots. If you're a contender watching this, let's say you're a well-rounded striker with manageable takedown defense, you are seeing the blueprint. Chimaev's stock just did two things at once. It went up in the rankings and went down in the risk appetite of potential dance partners. Fighters who rely on late surges will not love this. Fighters with high first layer takedown defense and instant stand-up games will circle him, not sprint at him. Promoters will work both ends. They'll book Chimaev with athletes who can survive the mat and create scramble chaos because that sells the "can he be boring against this guy?" question. And they'll book Du Plessis with aggressive wrestle boxers to test whether this was style tax or systematic weakness. In the gym, the adjustment is clear. Replicate Chimaev pace entries in sparring. You don't need to match his strength. You need to match his timing. Make him miss the first grab becomes a day one drill. The fighter who breaks Chimaev's rhythm won't be the guy with the strongest sprawl. It'll be the guy who never lets him get both hands on something useful. Now let's indulge the immediate question. If they ran it back, what would have to change? For Du Plessis, first exchange protocol, no collar tie flirtations, no long lead hooks in the open, short jab feints, inside hand discipline, and a split second pivot outs. You're not scoring in that first 20 seconds, you're denying. Second, edge of logo footwork. Hug the outside hash marks, make entries long, not short. Every extra step Chimaev takes before level change lowers his finish rate and raises your sprawl success. Third, Restand automation. As soon as your hips hit the mat, one hand posts, one hand peels. Don't fight the crossface. Move your hips away from it. You can shadow box this in the mirror, but it has to be automatic under fatigue. Now for Chimaev. Add visible damage. You don't need it to win, but if you want to end the boring talk, build in elbow burst sequences from half guard and knee on belly transitions. Same control, higher drama. Variation on finishing attempts. Pepper in arm triangles and front headlock transitions when opponents turtle to stand. Even near finishes change public perception and can create more space for strikes in future bouts. Jab maturity. We saw how even a single jab reset Dricus's round 5 momentum. Double it, mix the tempo, and you'll earn safer entries late. Now, what's the broader lesson for fighters coming up? This fight is a masterclass in controlling the negotiation, not just the fight. People say styles make fights. True. But timelines win them. If you can move a fight from 5 frantic arguments to 5 quiet monologues, you've solved more than an opponent. You've solved the audience. Make the cage small. Make the minutes long. Make the other guy's best moments hypothetical. Why this boring win was a warning. The most dangerous wins are the ones that don't give you tape to solve because they remove the situations you need to study. Chimaev did not give Du Plessis enough clean striking sequences to build a case. He did not expose exchanges that future opponents can copy-paste. He handed the division a paradox. We know what he'll try to do, and yet we don't have much successful film on how to stop it at scale. And that's the irony of the booing. The crowd wanted a fight they recognized. Chimaev gave them a fight he chose. In the record, that's called a champion's win. In the arena, that's called boring. In the gym on Monday for a 185-pound contenders, it's called homework. So sure, call it dull, but understand what you're actually saying. The other guy never had the oxygen to be himself in a sport where identity wins rounds, pressure, guy, sniper, grinder. The cruelest victory is to erase the identity across 25 minutes. If you're Du Plessis, that stings. If you're Chimaev, that's the blueprint. And if you're the rest of the division, you just learned what inevitability feels like when it wears 4-ounce gloves and doesn't care whether you're entertained or not. This wasn't the war most expected. It was the war that counts. Thank you.